Welcome to my house.
It's a hell of a house.
No, just kidding.
Hell of a house,
This
mate.
is a beautiful setting. Why are we here?
We had to come somewhere as important as Werribee Mansions to talk about a car as important as the car that we're talking about today. If this car didn't come to be, the company that built it would have ceased to exist. And it's that car. It's a Tipo 101 Giulietta Sprint.
It's tiny.
It's very small.
We're going to fit in it?
Yeah, we're going to fit in it. Scaglione, who designed this car, basically had done so many prototypes and show cars and concepts, particularly the Bat cars.
Yeah. Oh, I love the Bat cars, yeah.
That elements of those cars contributed to it, but it's diminutive, you know, it is a small car.
I can see that. I mean, proportionally, compared to the 1900 coupes, which were the predecessor to this, I mean, it's much, much smaller, isn't it?
But so are the mechanicals, you know.
Yeah,
You know how big a 1900 engine is?
It's a massive engine.
These things are tiny and delicate and light, and everything about them is compact. There's just something about the form of this car, it just works
Absolutely.
so well.
I mean, you look at the styling of it, I mean, it's got this aerodynamic look to it, you know, the shapes.
It's a slippery looking car, isn't it? It's a slippery looking car. It's a beautiful thing. And then cars, today, if you think about a car with steel wheels, that's cheap.
Yeah.
But cars with steel wheels in the 50s, it was a normal thing.
Sure.
Cars with light alloy wheels
But
was
they're
an
very
exceptional
pretty
thing.
steel wheels, aren't they?
Those beautiful
metal
hubcaps
wheels,
and the cross and serpent, they cover big drum brakes. It's just a car to behold.
Tiny little tyres.
Small section.
What are they? 175/65.
But it grips. You're
Yeah.
gonna love it. It grips.
Yeah.
You're gonna love driving this car.
So we're just going to stand around and talk about it, or are we going to get in and drive it?
Let's drive it.
Let's go.
Come on, let's go.
It's just a beautiful property, isn't it?
It is a beautiful property.
Speed hump. You trying to fly over it so it doesn't hit the exhaust?
Catch some air, man.
My head just went straight into the roof then.
Don't be a complainer.
I'm not being a complainer. You know, I was a Alfa Romeo virgin before I came to you. I said slow down over the speed humps.
You hear that?
It sounds great.
That is the wonder of the Alfa Romeo 1300 spinning out just to 4,000 revs, just a fraction of what it's capable of.
So tell me, why did this diminutive little car save a company like Alfa Romeo?
Because you have to understand what Italy was like after the war. The devastation that spread across northern Italy also devastated Alfa Romeo. What effectively the company had to do to continue to not just to exist but to thrive was to take everything that was of value pre-war that made them what they were and harness them into new cars that would keep people interested in new ways. Once that car rolled out in 1954 at the Turing Motor Show and the public swarmed around it, here was a car that was, you know, small by dimension, modest in price, with a spec sheet that showed that it was an exciting car to drive, and, you know, bearing in mind that a few years earlier this was the same company that had become the first world champions of Formula One. In my mind, they did two spectacular things.
Yeah.
The first one was the engine in this car, the all aluminium twin overhead cam 4-cylinder.
All aluminium. Previously it was a cast iron block
Cast
with an
iron block.
aluminium head, so it was
Correct.
getting quite technical for the 50s, early 50s, late 40s even, wasn't
right.
it? Yeah, so, and then this became an all aluminium, much smaller in size dimensionally than the previous
much
engine.
smaller.
Yeah.
But for its size, it packed a punch. And it was, you know, it was revvy and fizzy and effervescent and all those things that the press
It sounds
described it
great.
as. It sounds fantastic and unburstable.
Yeah, go you good thing.
One of the things I love about this car is you can drive it really aggressively and then you're not going that fast.
That's right.
It's kind of like riding a motorbike, this car. It's terrific.
Riding a motorbike.
It just makes you feel like it's...
Because you've got to really tip yourself in. This
would have felt like the most modern, advanced, sophisticated thing going around.
Yeah, well, there was still a lot of old technology getting around in the 50s.
Oh yeah.
You know, and a lot of it was still pre-war. Companies didn't have enough money to get out of that. You know, they started reproducing what they were before the war.
The question I've been asked a number of times is, where did this car get its name? And like all things Italian, it makes no sense. In 1950, when its predecessor was launched, the 1900, there was about 8 guys Jean-Pierre Wimmerly, who was a French racing driver, and 7 executives from Alfa Romeo were at the launch for the 1900 in Paris. And after the launch, they went to a nightclub. And in the nightclub, allegedly, Wimmerly was recognised by a Russian prince, right? And he introduced this Russian prince to the executives and told him what they were doing in Paris. And he turned around and exclaimed, "How can there be 8 Romeos and no Giulietta?" And this is maybe an urban legend, but I think it fits in quite nicely that is where the car got its name from.
There's not a lot of travel in the...
That's the spirit.
What am I getting? Yeah.
You see? You like it already, don't you?
It hasn't got a huge amount of acceleration, but it's definitely a fun...
You got to wind it up, Dave. You got to wind it up, mate. Wind it up.
Okay.
Wind it up.
Wind it up.
Find out where the limits are, Dave.
So there's not a lot of accelerated travel from nothing to full on, is there?
Compared to all the Alphas you've driven that have a pair of Webers that have really long travel, it's got nothing.
Okay.
The linkage is really
And this
short.
is a single carby car.
Single carby car, a double barrel downdraft. Despite the fact that it has almost no torque,
Yeah.
if you're in 5th and you're at low revs, it still has the feeling as though you can just open the taps and it'll pull away. It's quite strange.
Okay, 1 minute. 80 k's an hour, 5th speed, no throttle, full throttle.
It does what you tell it does.
It's so... That's cool. It's got a really direct steering, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's like your hands are connected to the front wheel.
Yeah, and it's got so much grip, this
Well,
car.
it's got a bit of grip. The front end's good. It's planted, but the rear end you can really you can get it around. Yeah. Hasn't got massive horsepower, but it's fun through the corners, you know, and that's what.
I've never seen you drive a car for the first time and be this impressed with it.
It's so easy to live with too, isn't it? Like you can drive it like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Like you're on the way to lunch
Yeah.
in the country somewhere and you're late. You could drive it, you know, you're desperate for a vino.
That kind of that caricature of the Italian driver.
Yeah.
It came from this car.
You would
That
think so, yeah.
full throttle,
driving
always
like
flat
a
out.
madman.
Yeah. Soaring at the wheel.
Yeah.
That kind of lunacy, it came from this car.
Yeah, I can see that.
100%.
Doesn't stop so well. That's the one thing that lets it down a little bit. If I was driving it the way I want to drive it,
Yeah.
I think I would struggle sometimes coming into a corner. It's the same thing with all drum cars.
cars.
You know, 356 is the same. After a while, you start running out of brakes. For a car that was designed and built in the 50s, I've driven quite a few 50s cars, and it is so modern.
So you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It is the car that saved Alfa Romeo,
Yeah.
and this is why it saved it.
Like I say about Italian cars all the time,
Yeah.
the driving experience is about the emotions. It's the sound, it's the experience,
But you
it's the look, it's
but
all of those
You
things.
gave this car technical ticks in all the boxes.
This car,
Yeah.
yeah, this car. I'm not saying I give all Alfa Romeos ticks in those boxes.
There's always a but.
I had a lot of fun in this car, didn't I? And I really gave it to it through a few corners. If you throw it into a corner, it will move around. It moves around quite a lot. Body rolls, and then the rear end starts to step out, but none of it.
It talks to you while it does it.
It talks to you whilst you're doing it. None of it is unpredictable, but once you've got this thing wound up, and you've rode it through all the gears, and you're really moving along, as long as you keep that momentum going and you try not to use the brakes, then, you know, throw it into the corners, you know, feel like you're really trying hard, and you're doing a lot.
It's a car that rewards you for driving it properly.
Yeah. Benny is always banging on about Alfa Romeo. And so I always sort of come into these things with, here we go again. But this car, it was amazing. It's starting to click with me, the Alfa thing. I kept having to remind myself that this car was designed and built in the mid-50s.
Yeah.
Lightness of design, dynamic handling, light engine, modern techniques, casting techniques, all of these things make it feel like a much newer car.
This was why the company was so highly regarded throughout those 3 decades mainly, the 50s, the 60s and the 70s. I really think Alfa Romeo built some of the best mass production sporting cars the world has ever seen in those decades. The Giulietta is a car that built many castles for Alfa Romeo, and consequently to be sitting here and talking about such a car in such an environment as Werribee Mansions, where there is so much history, which is so important to us as enthusiasts, it's a very nice thing.
Yeah, it's a nice match.
Yeah, very nice match.